Alright guys, what is up? This is going to be the beginning of the winter build series. So, you guys been watching the videos religiously, or if you just seen a couple videos, you obviously noticed that the car does not want to launch off the line. It's really frustrating. I was trying to make it work the best I could without, spending a bunch of money on suspension, because I was trying to hold off till this winter to make that happen. Well, the winter's here. The problem with the car is obviously the suspension. So we would go to launch. If the track wasn't absolutely perfect, the car would spin and we'd lose a 60 foot pretty much every time. So I understand there's quite a few issues with that, and I've watched I'm like a YouTube mechanic, a suspension specialist at this point with all the YouTube videos I watched on it. Not really, I'm still learning for sure. But a lot of you guys comment, and you were 100% right, the front end is separating way too fast. So basically what happened is front end comes up super fast, and then it looks like the rear end, it like upsets the rear end, and then it makes it to where the whole suspension is just not driving together. I'll insert a couple clips right here.
So I'm going to show the actual launch in real time, and then I'm going to show the same launch but slower down. And I'm going to explain what I'm seeing and what we need to fix this winter moving forward. All right, so the first thing I noticed on this one is the front end separates extremely fast and then hits those travel limiters that I welded on. And then the next thing you're going to see is the tire crinkles, and then the whole rear of the car pops up. And that will lead into a perfect example of what I'm going to explain to you with the rear end of the car's issues. Honestly, I think this one's the same problem. It just happened a lot faster. I'm sure I had the RPM turned up a little bit more, maybe like 36 or 3700 RPM. The track was actually really good this day, if I remember right. This almost took it, but I still think the same problem is happening where that rear end is running out of travel. And this one's just flat out disgusting. So moving on.
How you cut good 60 foot is you have the front suspension jiving with the rear suspension jiving, and then the weight biased and your instant center and your anti-squat and all that. I understand all that. I just know that my suspension was not where it needs to be this year, and I knew I needed to make a bunch of changes, so that's what we're doing now. We're gonna dive into the suspension, probably spend way too much money, but it's what you have to do to compete in these classes. So we'll start out with the front end issues and plans. I installed some travel limiters on the front end because I was thinking if I just limit the travel, then it'll transfer the weight to the rear end, and then we'll make the rear end do the work. Well, that kind of worked. And why I say kind of is because on good prep, it works because the front end would come up, hit those stoppers, and then the rear end would do the work. And if it didn't separate too much, then the car would go down the track. But we ran into a lot of issues with that when the track prep wasn't really there, or things changed, weather and all of that. So these are the travel limiters that I installed. It's basically just a bolt, and then I welded a nut to the top of the control arm, and then it hits the frame right there, and it stops the front end from traveling so much. So that's like, I have them adjusted out quite a bit right now, but that is all the way traveled out, which not much separation there. And that was really just a Band-Aid is all that was. So TRZ, I think it's TRZ Motorsports, they make a nice bracket that you cut out this little section right here, and it makes it to where you can bolt an eyelet, I think is what it's called, upper shock mount there, and then it gets rid of that rubber bushing. And then the next thing, obviously, to make that work is new shocks in the front. So those are Viking Crusaders, I believe. So it's the step down from the Warriors. Crusaders are kind of like your beginner level, I think. And that's what I have on the front and the back. I think there's a couple things going on. I'm overpowering those first off. And then second off, they're probably worn out because I've had them for like 3 or 4 years now. And I drive this thing on the street a lot. I've hauled it on the trailers a lot. So it's just constantly getting bounced around. And so I've got to hook up a guy, not really a hookup, but it's just a guy that I've been told he really knows what he's doing about building shocks. So I'm gonna get a hold of him. Probably go with AFCO. I'm just saying that because it seems like a really good brand. I really don't know. I'm gonna ask around a little bit more to see what everybody thinks a good brand or valving and all that to make the car work. That is the plan for the front so far. So the rear is a whole different mess of problems. Let me raise this thing up and I'll show you guys. Okay, so if you look up there, I probably should have shown you guys before I lifted it up, but the tire is not that far down from the fender well. Just remember that part when I get into explaining all this. So I have a 4-link kit, kind of. And why I say kind of is because if you look, this lower bar has this adjustment and then one extra hole up there, and that's all my adjustments. It has 2 holes on that too. So obviously what I'm getting at there is I do not have a lot of adjustments. And then the top, that's where it's at. So I've got 1 hole there and 1 hole there. Obviously not an ideal 4-link setup for drag racing because you need a lot of adjustments, right? This was actually, funny story, this was actually a kit bought for me when I graduated college from my old man. It was a damn good gift, and I was super ecstatic at the time, but neither one of us had really idea what you really needed to have for drag racing. And it's kind of taken off for the last 2 years, and I've understood that there's a lot of issues with this. It's just, you don't have the adjustments that I need. So along with that is what I was talking about earlier with the tire being that far from the fender well is my shocks are completely extended right now. And that only equates to like a couple inches of travel from settled height to fully extended height. And that, I think, is one of my main issues with the car this year is that I had enough anti-squat, so the rear end was separating. The front end, a whole different story, but the rear end was separating. Then it would run out of travel, and then that's where I would see every 20 foot, 30 foot out, whatever it was, the car would start spinning because it had no more travel for the car to separate and continue to plant the tire to the ground and go straight. The plan is, I have a buddy, his name's Jeff, and he's actually the one that put in my cage, my 850 cert cage 2 years ago, and he is going to come over hopefully tonight and give me a good idea of what I need to do with a couple different things. I want to take my rear end out, cut all those brackets off, file everything down or grind it flush or whatever with the tubes, and then I want to buy 10 Soldier race cars. They have a really good custom kit to set up a 4-link system, and they have all the adjustments that you can ever imagine. And it comes with shock mounts, the 4-link brackets for the rear end and for the chassis, so the car, and then the 4-link bars. That's what I'm shooting for. The only problem is at that point you're back half in the car, so I have to cut a bunch of stuff out. And then I also have to make mounts for the coilovers because obviously I can mount this shock a little bit lower, but you don't want it too close to the bottom of the tire. In order for me to go up to get more travel, it's gonna send it through the floorboard. So I'm assuming what's gonna have to happen is I'm gonna have to cut this pan out along with up there and then build some sort of plate to go up, weld a bar across here to mount the 4-link brackets to for the chassis. So it's just a full-on reconstruction of the rear of the car, which probably is considered back half in the car. So that's what I have to do, I feel like, to compete with the guys in this streetcar shootout class, because those guys are running 460s. And that's not even the fastest. I think even for me to be entered or be considered to be in the game, I'm probably looking at 480s to 460s is what I'm guessing. So I have a lot of work to do, and the best I ran was a 552 this year. So I understand that is a huge feat to get from 550 to 480, but I feel like the rear end adjustability and the coilovers all the way around is really what I'm gonna have to do to get this thing into the fours. And if that's what it's gonna take, then I'm gonna make it happen. So with all that being said, the plan is to order the chassis mounts and the rear end mounts from Tin Soldier Race Cars and get all of those positioned, fabricated in. Jeff's gonna help me get all those bars put in where they need to be. And then I'm gonna take the rear end out starting next week. I'm gonna take the rear end out and cut all those brackets off there that you just seen and clean all that up. And then we're gonna mock up basically all those brackets and get the bars in there and start adjusting things. And basically anyway, I'm just gonna start cutting. That's what's gonna happen. And hopefully we can do it in a really clean way, because I don't wanna compromise the streetcar theory or idea with this car. I don't wanna cut too much into it, but that is the plan. So this video was just basically to tell you what I have in store this winter, and I'm gonna make videos of it throughout the whole winter, and I'll take you guys along with. If you guys got any knowledge to drop or to add or things that I should try to look into, go ahead and drop a comment and let me know, because I read all those and a lot of you guys have some good knowledge that I don't have. I mean, I'm only 28 years old and a lot of you guys have been doing this for as long as I've been alive. So let me know if you got anything to add. And this next video, we'll be tearing this rear end out, cutting those off, cleaning those things up, and getting this suspension right so we can be competitive in those classes next year. But that'll be for next week's video. So come back and see what I, grind and tear up. So see you later, guys.